Hello and welcome back, my fellow FileMaker friends, fans, and developers. Again, this is Matt Petrowski creating FileMaker tutorials at FileMakerMagazine.com. Now, this is a continuation of the first video I did, which hit a half an hour, and so I decided to break it up. What I'm going to give you in this one is more information about why you really don't need to be concerned about having your own base original theme. If you look at a lot of FileMaker's themes, and as I explained in the first video, they have used a header, a body, and a footer on pretty much every layout. It shows you how to use slices. I covered how you can use slices in order to position things. There's really no way around it. A good-looking layout is always going to require tweaks. So if we go into, if we turn off the guides, which I think will be that right there. If we go into the layouts, and we can see that Ocean was applied to this particular layout. We can see that Ocean has radiuses defined on fields, and we have tabs and everything is specified to be the way that the CSS defines. The CSS, at the point in time that you apply it to the layout, simply walks through all of the elements on the layout, and we'll take a look at this, and applies what was injected into the FileMaker file. But any tweaks that you make to the layout which make it look good will simply get overridden. So you really need to abandon any idea that I'm going to be using the change theme, this menu option right here of change theme, on all of your different layouts, on all of your different solutions all the time. No, you're pretty much only going to do it once, maybe twice, unless you're testing a theme in order to get some core elements in there with some of the CSS features that FileMaker doesn't provide. Otherwise, the rest of what makes your layout look good, you're simply going to tweak, and you're going to make it look good. So let's bring up the theme. Let's switch to Forest, and then we'll switch back to Ocean. And just take a look at what happens. We're back in Ocean, but we have nothing in terms of what that layout looked like before. That should be very obvious, because the layout itself, despite the fact that we have themes, simply uses the defaults that were injected into the file. Everything else that made the theme look good were tweaks, and you're not going to be able to get around those. So as I undo to go back to the original way that it looked, which is really nice with those multiple undos, that's what you need to keep in mind. You really don't have to go in and create these CSS themes or these CSS files. You still have to design. What you now have access to are extra features. So what are some of those features? Well, one of them we already took a look at. As I switch over back to my test, one of them, which is really cool, is the fact that we can put an image, or just a tiny slice of an image, very small. It's repeated across the width of the layout part, and layout parts themselves are now backgrounds. They can be backgrounds for the consistent areas of your solution, and they can optionally be on or off. I can take the footer on or off, and I have access to all of the other parts that I have access to. I can define the CSS on those, or if I don't want to define the CSS, I can simply just add in a header, which is going to change, and if I don't like this header, I'm simply going to go over and change it to an image or a gradient or a solid color or a fill, and do all the same things that I would be able to do with the CSS, covering the 80% of what's available. Some of the tweaks are things like box shadows, etc., which are really things that maybe once in a while you need them, but you can replicate them in the interface, such as being able to create gradients. It's really no big deal for me to select, drag out a box right here, and then go to a gradient and make that gradient an inverse shadow by simply double-clicking and then saying I want this to be 50%, and then I want this one to go also to black, but I want it to be 0%. I mean, that's everything that Gradient Maker was doing, and I want to turn off my line. And no big deal. There, I can use an overlay right there. And let's back this off. Let's back it down to like 20%. So I'm basically able to replicate the exact same thing that I was doing within the older FileMaker 11. I just have more efficient objects now. So what else do you have access to? Well, there are things in CSS such as the margin and the padding and images and gradients, of course. Gradients are an obvious no-brainer. But for example, this right here is a portal. But you notice that there is no scroll bar on this portal, and that's because I turned it off. Now that's something you have to do within CSS. And it's basically, that's something I'll leave up to you to figure out, but this is a portal that will scroll because the scroll bar is turned on. If we take a look at the data, or excuse me, if we double click the portal, we can see if I was selected on a relationship, we've got show vertical scroll bar. It is checked. Yet when I go into browse mode, it is not there because I can control and turn that off with CSS. You're also going to notice as I select that this text field right here, which also has a an inner shadow, something that FileMaker, that's one part of the 10% that FileMaker does not provide. You'll also notice as I zoom in, which I'll do zoom in right now, another thing that FileMaker does not currently provide, which they inevitably will, are individual borders. In FileMaker, it is an all or nothing. So if you want to modify all of the individual borders on an object, you're going to have to do that with the CSS. So you can see right here as I select, look at the total boundaries of this object. You can see as I drag, it says X is, well, that's this, the left versus the top. But if I go to the position tab, you can see that the width is 144 and 28. But if I actually drag out an object matching that object, you can see that this object, the width is 128. But yet when I select this object, it's actually saying it's 144. That's because with the CSS, I can control and inset this object. And there will be reasons to do that. Think of think icon. Yes, you would be able to attach an icon to that in all likelihood. Also, like I mentioned on the borders, FileMaker only gives us access to an all or nothing on the borders. You cannot individually choose a color for each different border. So you can see right here I have this border as one color, and this border as another color. That's something you definitely have to do within CSS. Now, another thing I want to let you know about the themes and how they work. When you use that change theme option, all it does is FileMaker looks at all of the objects on this layout and cycles through them and applies the CSS that was injected into the file to those objects. Here's a case in point. With these two objects within the footer, in fact, we'll switch back over to Sublime and we'll take a look at the wave.css and we will look at footer. Now remember, there were different things here. We had footer self, which is the footer, the actual object. We have footer inner border, which has an inner border setting. And then we have footer text box. Let's compare that to body text box. So we've got body text box self, and we have the body self. So the difference between this .self class selector and this text box .self means that for a text box within the body, I'm going to apply these rules right here. Otherwise, I'm going to apply something different based on the part that it's within. So if we switch over to FileMaker, watch what happens when I bring up and I invoke. Now remember, I took buttons from other themes. This object and this object came from the Ocean theme from the assets database. But it's no big deal. I copied them in here. But as soon as I run this change theme, I'm going to wipe out. It's simply going to cycle through all objects and wipe those out. That's why I'm telling you it's really no big deal. The only time you really need to mess with the CSS is when you want to get things in that you don't have access to, such as the borders and some of the box shadows, etc. So when I apply the theme of the Theme Studio theme again, you'll notice that the button got changed, the object got changed. Well, I was using Wave, so it didn't get changed that much. But these two objects stayed the same. But watch what happens when I move this one up in here and I now apply the theme of the Theme Studio. Boom. You notice that this changed simply because FileMaker cycled through all of the objects. It says, oh, here's a text object. It's a text object within the body part. Oh, what do I do with text boxes within the body part? Oh, well, I apply this CSS. Well, it's really no big deal. I can just throw this down here into the footer part and just make FileMaker cycle again. So this is a trick that I'm showing you. choose Theme Studio, boom. I just cycled that object and made it apply the CSS that was injected into the file to that default object. But if I had not wanted these other objects, which were custom, to be wiped out, I definitely would have done this on another layout or in another file. So you're definitely going to have to choose when and how much time you spend with CSS. All right, and this last part to wrap things up is going to be some additional tips. I'm going to leave it up to you to go through the CSS and figure out what you can control and what you have access to. But the tip that I'm going to leave you with is, if you are going to take the time to create whole themes, going through all of the different objects that FileMaker supports. And remember, they are absolute. You don't have multiple bodies. You don't have multiple leading subsummaries, trailing subsummaries, footers, headers. You only have one, and you only have one class type. Who knows if FileMaker is going to support more, or if they're just going to go with one. In fact, all of the CSS that you see right here, it's on the objects themselves when you copy these objects to the clipboard. But my suggestion to you is, this came from one of the responses that I got from the Theme Studio people asking about whether they're going 12 or 11. Is one of the things that they found frustrating is they like FileMaker's themes. They like all of everything that FileMaker provides here. It's nice, but it's limiting. I mean, what if you've got blue, green, and red? What if you actually wanted orange on this particular one? Well, I'm going to show you how you can do that relatively quickly, and then give you some insight into how you would do it if you're going to create your own new base starter theme. FileMaker, or just like anything, CSS, just like anything else as a text file, you can do a find and replace. So if I was to look for this particular color, grab that up and do a find and replace, you can see right here I could find every occurrence of 56808C, and I could replace that with whatever I want. Let's go and make it CCC, CCC, and then we will just replace all throughout this whole file. So boom, it was just done. And then I will save that. So what we get right now, if we go in and we apply the wave theme, or the the wave 2 theme that I'm working with here, manifest. I'm going to need to increment my ID. There we go, just in case it's already been applied to the file. And it's called wave mine. So if I go in, I'm in layout mode, and I change the theme, I go to wave mine. Even though remember this preview, all it is a screenshot. It's a screenshot of an image coming from the images folder. This is not representative of what we're going to get right now, as is the case right there. You can see that formerly this was going from a green, but now I've converted it to a gray in this area right here. So that was simply a find and replace within the CSS file, if you want to do that. Now, if you're going to be creating your own themes, and again, my suggestion is, if you want to create your own theme, you're using it to take advantage of the CSS. You're doing it on your own copy of FileMaker just because it's going to be well known that you can, and you're simply going to do it on a copy of FileMaker strictly for the purpose of being able to get it into the file. Who knows what FileMaker is going to do in the future in terms of how things may get changed. They probably won't change the format of objects, so you're always going to be safe because the CSS has been injected into the file. But after it's injected in the file, the rendering of the layout comes from the objects themselves. It does not come from the CSS that was injected. It does not come from the external file. It comes from what the layout has on it in terms of objects, and what those objects are defined to render in terms of the CSS that they have on them, including the body parts. So after it's been applied, it really doesn't matter anymore what it is behind the scenes. Who cares? It could be black and white. Your layout now is rendered based on the objects. But if you're going to do this, let me switch over and give you some little suggestions, and I will give you some pointers. There are some languages It started with less, called the Dynamic Style Sheet Language, and then there was a follow-on language called SAS, the Style with Audio, which is an offshoot of Ruby if you're comfortable with Ruby. Then beyond these actual meta classes, which all these they are supersets that ride on top of CSS. So if you're going to take the time to learn CSS, and you're going to take the time to do some themes, take the time to learn either less or SAS. I learned less originally myself. I then chose SAS because of a supporting Ruby gem called Compass. And that's because Compass allows you to auto-generate a lot of your CSS. And I've started my own base theme, which I'll put on GitHub. I've already got it up, I believe, on there, which uses Compass and SAS in order to generate. And basically it works like this. Let's switch over to, do I have the theme loaded? I don't. Let's just look at less on top. Basically all this is as a meta language. As you can see right here, you're defining an at base. And that means the base color for this whole theme. And it says the color is F938AB. Well, if you look at the actual CSS, all right here, it is simply referencing different values. And right here you can see base, and then you can see base again. So as I've already covered in a previous video, actually a video on the magazine site talking about dry coding, that's all this is. It's a meta superset on top of CSS, which instead of going to each of the different properties for all of the different selectors and saying, I want this to be this color, I want this to be this color, I want this to be this color, you define the color once up in the top. And then this meta language, which less uses JavaScript, it simply uses JavaScript, and then it simply replaces automatically for you, and there are generators all of these different positions. In fact, there's a less application for the Mac. SAS and Compass doesn't, they may have applications somewhere, but I use them on the command line. And in fact, the information right here, if you're on a Mac, is right there, gem install SAS. Ruby is already installed on the Macintosh if you want to be able to use these base themes. Now what this gives you is it gives you access. Let me, I could bring up my Git box really quickly. Gitbox, FMP theme, we'll open that in the Finder so we can take a look at it. You can see right here that when I take a look at this, I think I've got, if I send this to Sublime, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to open in that window right there. SAS, cache, themes, config, theme, there it is right there. So basically you can see that I've got the manifest is going to be unique. This ID is always going to be unique, but the theme itself is something that can all be generated automatically, including tables, all the different aspects that are used. Now there's a lot of stuff that's going on. If you're going to be previewing your CSS in a web browser, before you go into FileMaker, you have to do a bunch of things. You can see that I'm using IDs, and then I would post-process these and convert them. I mean, yeah, you could build your own builder, but really you're not going to want to. But here's what SAS is in terms of an SCSS file. You can see right here that I've got a variable called blue, which simply specifies a color. And I could use this variable in all of the CSS for layout, layout background, layout header, leading grand summary, body, trailing, footer, all of the different FileMaker parts. But again, what I'm showing you right now is very muddied in terms of this is all behind the scenes stuff. I'm using ID values to represent FileMaker objects, which then further have their own classes, such as body.self and body.inner border. And these are the strictly defined classes that FileMaker is using. You cannot make your own class, such as body whatever. It just won't work. FileMaker is only going to interpret what FileMaker has specified for its own CSS spec. It's exposed because we have access to the themes folder, but you're not going to be able to create your own. So you're going to have to follow along with what FileMaker has. So as I close this up, I just want to leave you with the fact that if you thought that themes are going to be, remove folder from project, if you thought that the themes is something that you're going to be applying over and over again and using the change theme and going through your whole solution, really the only time you're going to do it is once on each layout. And that's only if you're going to take the time to replicate a theme that already exists and then modify it and tweak it to have what you want, like I've done for the Theme Studio. The only part that I needed to tweak in the CSS, I duplicated a pre-existing theme and then I tweaked just the body part and then applied it. And then I decided, okay, I want to tweak the footer, and then I applied it. And then I said, okay, I need to tweak the buttons because I want to make my own buttons, and I tweaked the buttons and made those. And I just used the CSS within the theme folder for the purpose of being able to get and modify those objects to get them into a layout. Once they're in the layout, I'm never going to choose the change theme again. I'm just going to go to a layout and then I'm going to grab the objects. So if I have my Theme Studio layout and I've duplicated this layout, if I need a button that I've customized by going up here and using the regular FileMaker tools. So currently I've got the hover right there is set to be darker. If, for example, I wanted this button to have a hover, which uses a color, and I'll go to my HSB. Let's say for some reason I'm going to go with that, and I'll save that color. That's what I do want, that color. I want the hover state right here to be that. And then I want to get this, grab that object and make it slightly lighter. And there. So now that I've got this customized button, so when I'm in browse mode and I hover over this button, this was the one that was injected by my CSS, but this is the one that I'm using for some feature in my solution. It makes no point for me to go over to the CSS and do that again. I've got it right here with all of those settings. I can copy this object, go over to another layout, I can paste it, and the best feature is I can go to this object and then I can use these buttons right here. These are your power buttons right here, where basically this allows you to copy the object style and then simply go over to another object, whatever it is, and simply apply that style. So basically just copied everything off of the clipboard with all of the CSS and allows me to apply it. If, however, this one, which is custom, we can see because I hover, all of my hover. If I want this one in particular to go back to the default, because I happen to know that I modified the CSS with the default, all I'd have to do is go up here to this button and simply say remove all styles. Or, excuse me, that removes all styles and puts it to a FileMaker's root object. I would simply click this button right here to apply the theme style. That is the theme that was injected into the file, which was applied to this layout for this particular ID. So think about it. If you did have slight variations or tweaks based on different changing that ID value, this value right here. So if you had wave 4 versus wave 5 versus wave 6, and they all had slightly different tweaks to their buttons, and if you're using that for the purpose of storing, you could do that. I don't know why you would, because you can store these objects in a container or directly in a layout, which you can drag to and from. That's something you could do as well, by mere virtue of the fact that you could create and keep as many different template layouts in your file as you want. So that's what I have with regards to what I know about themes. That's pretty much everything. It's my mindset, it's my approach. There are some cool tools that I'm working on for the Theme Studio, which will allow you to do some cool things, such as what you find right here, which you can't currently do within the FileMaker UI, but I have no doubts that they're going to be adding that. But distributing your themes, if you want to give people the folder and they know how to put it into FileMaker, that's something that's going to be up to the community in terms of how they decide to deal with that and what FileMaker does. The coolest thing that they've got going on is the fact that the objects themselves are using the CSS. But going up here and doing this is not something you're going to be doing that frequently, unless you're just exploring. So that's what I've got with regards to themes. I hope this helps you out and answers some of the many hundreds of questions. Thank you very much if you replied. I love hearing from all of the people who have helped me and supported me with the theme studio. It's what allows me to keep going and to provide you with this type of information and provide you with the tools that I provide as well. If you did not support me, then by purchasing the products, obviously, then obviously I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now. So thank you very much. And as always, I wish you much luck and happy file making.